So is everybody totally confused now with the rest of the Hierophant?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why it was necessary that I did that other thing last week at the beginning of it. See, I know I say this a lot. This book was expressed back in the 50s. When occultism was first coming out. Now, he didn't say anything wrong in that part. The only thing he did wrong in this chapter was the 2332 thing there at the beginning. And he did that deliberately. But the reason this card is so important is when he's talking about, you know, he's basically talking about people going nuts. You know, people come from their impulsive side or just their conscious side, don't use enough of their intellectual side. In other words, people that don't take control of themselves to dare, to know, to be silent, and to will. People that don't use those four functions is they start this expansive process. That's why we showed you how to poke lavers away and stuff like that, and talked about building this shielded egg and stuff. It's like, and you have to excuse my appearance, it's like 105 in here. It's like, and he's basically just trying to get across to you that doing any type of spiritual work, I don't care if it's a religious work, I don't care if it's a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever, any type of spiritual work, you have to stay strong within self. You have to stay strong within self. I'll give you a couple of pretty radical examples. You know, every now and then you hear about the super fundamentalist Christian that decides to kill doctors that do abortions. Well, he's just as nuts as, you know what I mean? He's just as far out of whack as, you know, somebody that's killing somebody for Hitler or the devil or anything. I mean, there's no way that the Christian God said go out there and kill this doctor for doing that, you see? And so anytime a person gets enmeshed in any type of spiritual work, it requires an awful lot of self-control. You have to be self. And it's very, very important. That's why I keep saying trust self, trust self, trust self. Not the impulsive side, not the emotional side. We all, you know, we all get impulses. We all get emotions. We all get that. I mean, that's part of being human. And you have to be able to, when he says, you know, you don't act on it, you have to sit there and even though you want to smile, because somebody said you have to be able to decide if you're going to smile or frown or whatever. You have to take that kind of control of self. That's basically what we're dealing with in this whole fifth arcana. See, you turn around, he uses two different concepts when he's talking about basically what nowadays we would actually refer to as possession. See, it's basically what they would refer to as possession. You know, someone listens to a hate monger enough and they happen to be vulnerable enough to someone else's thought processes and stuff, and all of a sudden they start hating like the other person, and they start, you know, that's a laver. They're picking up this other person's energy and applying it to self, and then they do stupid things. It's important to avoid that. And it can be a laver or an elementar. Now, lavers are just floating around, but an elementar belongs to someone else. An elementar, if you pick up an elementar, it's because you allowed someone to turn you away from self, turn you into something else. You see? And it's not that difficult, and it happens a lot more frequently. I'm sure you know people that when you were in high school with them were really nice and all of a sudden turned into some kind of crudge-mudger. It's because they picked up, they're starting to work off someone else's thought form. Is you get into this, I don't worry about any of you being weak enough to have someone else infect you with an elemental. You're protected from that. You're too strong for that. That's not going to happen. But part and parcel of this responsible action is that you do not allow your elementar to influence someone else. See, this is it. In other words, if you turn around and you start developing your conscious strength, you start developing your will, and you use it to push someone to the point that it actually interferes with their normal processes, then you are doing something incorrect. Then you are interfering with their free will. So not only do you have to, which you already have, you're already capable of protecting yourself from this, but you have to be very, very careful as you develop your strength that you don't accidentally create one for someone else. That's why I ask you to play with these little situations and stuff. It's not like you're going to deliberately do something, but you know, everyone has a path, and they have to choose it, and they have to be allowed to choose it. You can't turn around and choose it for them. Okay? Now, you see, when you turn around and you deal with someone like Howard Caesar, Ed Young, Joel Osteen, Mohammed Boo-Boo, or anybody like that, people are willingly going to that church and they want to be impressed by that person. They want to deal with that philosophy and whatnot, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Those people, by their own free will, are doing that. You have to be very, very careful as you develop your abilities that you don't influence someone to change themselves, to change their free will, if they did not specifically ask to be instructed in that. In other words, you're really violating the rules if you turn around and go like, oh, you could do this. Or do, in other words, to push them or to give them create a desire on their part. These processes are very, very individualized. Yes, somebody like Nancy and Cindy, they work together, that's great. You know, but you can't turn around and influence other people's free will. If you do, you will harm them. They cannot finish their path if they're not themselves. So your job is to finish your path. And the most difficult part of this entire concept of this card right here is the burden, the weight of knowledge. It's like, you know, I'll sit down for a minute. You know, you turn around, what happens is, you know, you develop this ability and certain things become knowledge to you. So it's, you know, knowledge is completely different than belief. I mean, all of a sudden, yes, I can change my temperature. Or, wow, yeah, I can remove this health problem from this person. Or, see, that's knowledge. And it's a burden. It's really a burden. I can remember when I was younger one time walking in what would be called a Walmart nowadays. They didn't have them then. It was like a Kresge or something, your predecessor at Kmart or something. And I'm walking down the aisle with my wife and a couple of kids. And there was this child that had an obvious embolism that was getting ready to act up. I mean, it was obvious. I mean, a little 7 or 8 year old kid there with his mom and dad, and it was obvious the kid was going to have a stroke and it would kill him. I mean, it was big. Pretty soon. The mom and dad had pretty clean auras, pretty sensible. You know, I thought they could, you know, if they got the kid to the doctor and drained the thing, it would have been all right. Do you see what I mean? If they'd have got that blood clot out of there before it got any bigger, it would have been all right. So I tried to explain it to them. Burden of knowledge. Burden of knowledge. And that was non-karmic knowledge. I happened to be in Missouri when it happened. And, you know, a bunch of rednecks and stuff, they really weren't much open to it. But it would have been nice to save the child. Instead, I ended up with a couple of missing teeth and a broken nose. But see, but that's the burden of knowledge. It's like, and the further and further along you get, the more and more acute it will be. I mean, you'll just start picking up things. You'll start, at the beginning you won't be sure if it's precognitive or not, but you'll start getting this precognitive stuff and stuff like this, and it's a burden. Now, if you know the person, you can talk to them about it. But as you get more into that, you got that conscious man, the impulsive, the intellectual, is you get more into your intellectually conscious side, when your thought processes are constantly seeing that binary, constantly recognizing the opposite and everything, you're going to start understanding things that you didn't understand before, and if you try to explain them to most people, you just make an idiot out of yourself. You know, it's like, you can't tell a Republican that they're just as bad as the Democrats, and you can't tell the Democrats that they're just as bad as the Republicans. Or if you if you run into one that's really intelligent, they'll go, oh, it's the lesser of both evils. Like that's a solution? That's not a solution. See? And the solution is horrible. I mean, you know, I mean, we got a mess, but the whole world's got a mess right now. You see? But the world's not controlled by adepts and magicians. And you can't run around poking your finger in it. So you got that burden. You know? Now, there's nothing wrong with using the knowledge you achieve to protect you and yours. I mean, if you start developing a little bit of precog and all of a sudden you turn around and Taylor, you turn around and all of a sudden you have a dream at night and April gets in a wreck in the morning, there's nothing wrong with telling April, hey, if I could, don't go to work today. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't just go tell some Joe Blow. So it gets a little touchy in there. The burden of knowledge and avoiding infection. I refer to them as infections. You know, in the Catholic Church they call them exorcisms. And I'll guarantee you 75% of the people in the nut house wouldn't have to be there if they really had a good exorcism done. Funny thing, it's that easy. Did one last summer. Person had a whole second personality. Took about 2 hours. Flip, and it's gone. It's that fast. You can do those things. You did an exorcism on what's her name's armpit. I mean, that's what you did. You exorcised it. Well, thought forms, lavas, elementals, you can get rid of them the same way. But don't even try it until you really get your abilities developed. But the burden of knowledge, so you have to play with that. You have to get to where you deal with it. You have to take and go like, man, I got to do this. And you have to slow down long enough to make sure you see the other side. And in other words, you have to resist impulse. Now, you can't resist the emotion that creates the impulse, but you can develop yourself to the point that when that emotion comes, you immediately see the opposite of the impulse and take your time deciding on what is going to be best for you and yours. You have to resist impulse. And you also have to resist that conscious man. When he's talking about that conscious man, that person that works just from consciousness, is more subject to infection than even the impulsive man. The intellectually conscious man is what you want. Conscious man, oh, this is this, this is this, this is this, this is this. I know everything that I see, this is this, this is this. Oh, Joe Blow over here is pretty cool. I think I'll investigate that a little bit. And the next thing you know is you picked up a lava. Yeah. The conscious person is not looking at both binaries, looking at the present. Intellectually conscious. You have to keep that binary representation all the time, particularly when you start dealing with the heavy parts. I mean, next week we're going to get into some pretty little intricate stuff. But it's all going to be, all of a sudden, personal development. Some pretty good exercises. When he turns around, right in this pot here, you turn around and he'll say, take a 3-inch disc and throw it on the wall. And anytime you go in the room, you know, you look at it. Sometimes you're just looking at it out of your eye, boom, boom, boom. And the objective is to be able to create that disc when you're not in that room. The objective is anytime you want to be able to consciously, intellectually, consciously create that disc. Okay? So, but it doesn't have to be a disc. It can be, you know, just something you move in the room. It can be glass, a candle, a picture. Something you change a little bit that you just consciously try to stay aware of. All you're doing is you're training your visual aspects, your peripheral vision. When you start dealing with the ability to play with auras, you use things like that disc. We've got even better exercises than that. The one I find the most effective is to take 2 fingers, put them in front of each eye, and just very, very slowly bring them apart. Now, you keep doing that, you'll get to where you can have them way out here and actually have your eyes the opposite of cross-eyed. But once you get them just a couple of foot apart, you'll actually start picking up refracted color in the middle. You'll actually start picking up. So it's a matter of allowing yourself to, training yourself to start seeing refracted color. When you were a kid, you saw refracted color, but none of the adults did, so it was worthless to you. Still have occasional children that hold on to it. One of Aggie's friends, a chiropractor in Houston, had a son that, you know, kept seeing these things floating around in the room. And I was doing a reading for her and her husband. And I said, there's nothing wrong with the kid. There's nothing wrong with the kid. Let me see the kid. Bring the kid in. You know. And, you know, the kid got in a little bit of trouble with the other kids because he'd talk about it in school and stuff. It took me 20 minutes to explain to him, you can't tell people about this stuff, and they can't hurt you. You see? And so I turn around and I, you know, go, see, this is one of the things you see in here, this little black thing. So throw it for me, can't hurt you. Here, give me a hand. Here, see? Can't hurt you. Got nothing to do with it. And, but the kid never had anybody explain anything to him. He's got full auric vision. He's 9 years old. And nobody showed him how to use it. He didn't have anybody to show him how to use it. But his parents were laissez-faire enough that they never told him, oh, that's a bad thing or anything, and they let him hold on to it. And but he'd have trouble sleeping because these things would come in the room every now and then. See? And once he realized they couldn't hurt him, see, now they're just fine. You know? And so you're going to run into things like that. And it's up to you to carry that burden. Now, if you turn around and one of your grandkids or a friend of yours or something, and their kid is seeing these things and stuff, there's nothing at all wrong with sitting down explaining to the child where they're blessed. They're blessed to be able to see that. And once they're through puberty and make all the proper representations, it's a wonderful asset in life. It's a wonderful asset in life. So, and they can all do that. Well, before I move on, does anyone have any questions? This is important stuff. I know it sounds mundane, but this is important stuff.
Do you know where the black things floating, the thought forms from other people, elementars?
Not necessarily. Most, number one, they're not always black. The black things the kid was seeing was what you might call discarded thought form. Okay? Somebody got really super pissed off one time, or maybe got killed and died really angry or in a hell of a lot of pain, and a piece of them might have stayed here instead of going into transition with a whole, and so you got this little thing floating around. It's harmless. There's nothing you can do about it.
They're not always negative, though, are
They are not always negative. I mean, there's a real nice thought form floating around called world peace. You know, I mean, that's a nice thought form. You know, that one's pretty green, pretty easy to hook into. They're thought forms. Okay? Lavas are unmanifest. When these things you call ghosts and stuff like that, that's because something went wrong with that consciousness's transition into the guff. Okay? In Hermetics, we think mediumship, I mean, you know, we check it out, see if the person's good or not. I mean, if they can really do it. But mediumship per se is considered an extreme negative for the simple reason if that person now, even for the first 3 months while the person's in the guff, they're busy trying to pick their next body and in reality and demographics and stuff. Making them come here, we consider that as sin. If they're back in another body already, and you force the issue, you can seriously harm the new being. So talking to people that have passed is not something we do. If somebody from the past wants to talk to you, they can do it without any help. If they've got something you need to do, and there are cases of that. There are cases where someone will try to reach you, and because there's some little thing that didn't quite get finished, and it's got them hung up a little bit, And that happens. It's not frequent, but it happens. But thought form, basic thought form, most of them are just there. They're not even of this dimension. And a lot of them are sort of visitors. They're sort of visitors. I don't want to get too carried away into science fiction on you. But you know, like, if you ever read that book, Communion, about the aliens, you know that today a retired CIA guy come out and said, you know, Roswell was real. There was a crashed flying saucer and there were catamounts, there were dead entities in it. You know, they've been denying it for 60 years. See, well, you might say that's something that made it from another dimension over here, and none of its navigation or anything worked right because it's different here, and it, you know, things do pass through these areas every now and then. I mean, you get wonderful people like Sai Baba that can make physical manifestations and stuff. It's an aberration. The manifestations he made were not of here. It's using a thought form. You can't take when you did that with me there a while back, Cindy, you used a thought form to destroy a thought form. Do you see what I mean? So there are thought forms out there that one of the worst ones. This is one that's been promulgated by big pharmaceutical companies. That humanopapillomavirus is a precursor to cervical cancer, so all 12-year-old girls ought to get the shot so the pharmaceutical company can make $70 billion. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a thought form. HPV didn't exist until 10 years ago. It was created by a pharmaceutical company. You gals are old enough. Remember back in the 80s, all of a sudden they were selling feminine deodorant spray because women's cooters stunk, and they convinced women of that and made millions of dollars. Those are thought forms. And see, when they actually sometimes become big enough to be egregors, and so that egregor spits out loggers and it runs around infecting people, and that's how people sell stuff. That's how people make people want things or think they need them. You don't let any of that infect you. You don't need any of it. You know, you have no use for it. I mean, the thought form. Some of the worst ones. Now, I'm not saying there isn't such a thing as environmental poisoning and environmental problems, and that they shouldn't control things. But when people run around and there is a problem in an area, and they start saying, well, everybody that lives here is going to get cancer, and enough people did in the area, it makes it much worse. See, you have to allow the infection. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to allow the infection. And you do that anytime you buy into a belief. You are in charge of your body. That doesn't mean you can live forever, but you can do pretty damn good. You are in charge of your body. And so we have to deal with these concepts of these thought forms and elementars and even egregors in order to be able to build our intellectual consciousness, to know, to dare, to be silent, and to will. You have to be aware of what we're dealing with out there. You don't go around, I mean, if you're at the zoo, you don't walk up to the lion cage and stick your arm in there and poke it. Right? I mean, they're there. They're there. These thought forms are out there. It's like, you know, one of the ones that really, really gets a lot of people. My ma had breast cancer. My grandma had breast cancer. Both by the time they were 40 years old. I'm going to have breast cancer by the time I'm 40. God damn it, man, you're paying for it. You got it. You got it right there. Do you know what I'm saying? It's, you know, don't buy it. And those are the easy ones. You got to understand that. I mean, anyone should be able to understand that. You don't buy into the movie. But there are thought forms out there. One of the big ones. That's two of them. There's two really, really horrible ones that are creating a large enough conflict that it could be one of the biggest global problems in the near future. Is the fundamental Islamic thought form of if you're not Islam, you're going to hell and it's okay to kill you. And that fundamental Christian concept that says the same thing. You know, now the Christians matured enough. You got to remember, they've been around 600 years longer. But 600 years ago, we were running down there killing Muslims just because they were Muslims. We called it the Crusades. See? Those two thought forms are like really bumping heads. They're really bumping heads. And one of the things we really look forward to in Hermetics is we have a strong feeling that this winter solstice thing is going to cause some type of awakening that's going to mellow them out. That's going to seriously diminish both of the aggressive aspects of both of those thought forms. That's what we think. This whole the beginning of a new era. You know, if you could do away with religion, you'd pretty much do away with war. And it's, you know, the way it is. But see, those are egregors. They're so big that they're egregors. They're like a state. You know, that everybody's aware of. And unfortunately, a lot of people will identify with one or the other. I mean, I've got some friends, you know, you have to forgive me, I'll still use the word nigger and stuff like that every now and then. But, you know, when I was raised, you know, I had black friends right on the carnival lot. I'd call them nigger, and they'd call me honky, and I mean, that was all right. It's totally politically incorrect now. But there are people that actually hate black people just because they're black. There's a lot of them still left. You know, it's 21st century. There are people that hate people because they let their hair grow like Donald. Our young hippie medic. Do you know what I mean? People allow their belief to become opinion and then become judgment, and they're stuck. They can't go anywhere. They can't go anywhere. All right, questions? I thought for sure everybody was going to drive me crazy with the hocus pocus in this thing, but it's nice. You're unmuted.
So,
yeah, you're unmuted. Go ahead, Cindy.
So it was talked about creating a pentagram inside yourself? Is this something that we should visualize?
You already have it, remember, but you got to do the 2-3 thing, not the 3-2 thing.
And how does that fit? Does it just fit inside? Because the 2-3 would be, or it would be leaning. That would be out external.
Right. But then it spins to the left, counterclockwise.
Okay.
Okay? Say, so picture it like, you know, like a chakra.
Okay.
Okay? And it spins. So one of the best ways to deal with it is it look like yeah.
Okay.
You're like, you know, that's a pentagram. Your hands, your feet, and your head. Okay? But now you got that Yad, He, Shin, Vad, He. See, Shin, the guy that can't jump over the cliff. So you got the 4. You got the 4 that you turn into 3s. You see? And it's moving. So it's going one arm, then the next arm it's like Yad, He, Shin, Va, He, Yad, He, Yad, He, Shin, Va, He. The foot, Yad, He, Shin, Va, He. See? To know, to dare, to be silent, to will, and to develop the courage to jump off the cliff. When I told that young couple that their son was sick, that was a misuse of courage. I knew it was the wrong thing to do. It was a basic violation of our philosophy. And yet my little I self, my human I self, my little human ego thing, for some reason, decided that, you know, I was good enough to be able to explain it to him and help. Not good. Okay, Donald. You're next, Donald. You had a question.
Yeah. In the book, he talks about how there's a fire test, a water test. Like each of the elements have their own trial that the magician has to go through.
Yeah.
What is that exactly? Like, does that apply to everyone today? Or?
In the final processes of becoming an adept, it deals with the bind. Where was I? Oh, fire, earth, air, and water, and the tests for each one. Okay, I am not suggesting to anyone that they do this. But in the old days, we'd put our hand in the fire and pick up a hot coal. Then throw it away, and there'd be nothing wrong. That's a pretty extreme test. Anything you can do with pleasure, you can do with pain, and anything you can do with pain, you can do with pleasure. We don't use those type of things anymore. Okay? Trying to stay underwater, we don't do them anymore. Trying to, do you see what I mean? What we do nowadays is we'll take out 2 little heat strips. Or we'll play with each concept as it comes. We'll get into them in the future as we go through. We will get into them. And in the book, he will play with them a little bit, but we'll pretty much skate around that part and deal with the way it can be done pleasantly. Your test is internal. Your test is internal. It is not required externally. It is not required externally. No one's going to ask anybody to hurt themselves. No one's going to ask anyone to do something like that to prove it to themselves. We don't expect you to walk on water. If you happen to do that, please let me know. But we don't expect anybody to really do that. However, you've all heard of cases where some little teeny woman, like this little thing sitting behind me here that I doubt weighs 100 pounds, all of a sudden her kid gets stuck under a car, and I'll go over there and I'll lift the goddamn car up and get the kid out. It happens. It happens, you see. So that must be a possibility. You see, that must be, your body must be capable of that. Or your mind. Okay? There was a fella named Uri Geller. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He could take a piece of rebar or a kitchen spoon or something like that and twist it any way he wanted to, like a pretzel. Just looking at it from 10 foot away. Extreme telekinetics. Extreme telekinetics. Okay? If I did that, and I can, but if I did that on purpose, I'd probably have a heart attack. Everybody's wired a little bit different. Okay? There was this Otto Hugo. He could auto body to the extent that he went to work for the government. The government would send him over to Russia to read the papers on the thing. The government hired him as a spy. He was in the research labs with us at the parapsychology department in Duke University, and the government hired him. You see, there are those paranormal abilities that occasionally show up in individuals. There's a lady in Germany that can levitate. They pretty much keep her locked up. I mean, she's a research subject. I mean, they totally abuse this woman. But she can levitate. You know? I mean, she could get up and float into the kitchen and get a glass of water without walking. But those are one in hundreds of millions. You know, that there is no reason to desire that type of ability. It has no purpose in this space. It has no purpose in this space. If you develop any of that, you'll never get your vision. You'll have that instead. And what good is it? I mean, God gave you legs for walking, you don't need to levitate. And shit, the Wright brothers created an airplane. If you want to fly, you can do that too. What you want is you want your other two senses. That's what we're here for. We're here to develop your other two senses. We're here to develop your auric vision and your telepathy. Once you have your seven senses, once you have seven senses instead of five, you're a magician, or priestess if you prefer. While I'm at it, this is something you and Cindy would enjoy. You and April would enjoy playing with. You got a set of them out? They're called Zener cards. There's 5 of them, see? It's, you know, a star, a wave, a plus sign, a circle, a square. You can pick them up from Amazon for a couple of bucks. There's 25 cards. There's 5 sets of 5. There's 5 of each symbol. And one person sit there and look at the card like that, like you and Cindy could do it, and you guess the card. And you keep track, write it down, what's right, but you don't do it right away. You guess, you write down what it is and you turn them over like that, and then you check. And anything over 5 correct, and you're mathematically ahead. So that's it's just like playing with the heat strips. Say, wow, I got 7. Wow, I got 11. Now, every now and then you get that fluke. Every now and then you get that fluke. But if you can average 11, if you go through the cards 5 times and you average in 11, you know, it'd take me about a week to give you that first little bit of telepathy. It's really pretty simple. But these are good things to play with. They're called Zener cards. The guy that invented them was Carl Zener, Z-E-N-N-E-R.
Not one N.
Aggie said 1 N. I mean, the guy was one of my professors in college, but she's probably right. She's much smarter than me. But they're fun for the telepathy end. And if you want to screw with people like Aggie and I do, we get them right all the time. Bop, 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 bop. I got a mark deck. We got it by accident. No. We wanted a deck, and this deck here had the real bicycle cards on the back. And one day we realized they were marked. So we got the little booklet out, and sure as shit, they're marked. But but you can get them unmarked. We got them from Amazon. They cost less than $10. So you might want to play with that. Okay, questions again. Go ahead, Sid.
Just because of a class I took before, so the pentagram that we're making, is it anything like our Macarva?
Yes. Yes. The only reason we use a pentagram is because it's the universal symbol in the old days of man, of humanity. And everything is conceptual. It's conceptual. You could use almost any symbol. You could use almost any concept. Whatever fits you best. I tell you that whenever we deal with anything. Whatever fits you best. If I was talking to an Islamic person, instead of saying Yadeh Shin Vadeh, I'd say Allah. Do you see what I'm saying? No. The symbolism is a conceptualization in order to be able to instruct someone in how to do things. They can be modified at will. The concept is what's important. The macabre is a perfect relationship.
Hey, you didn't tell them when they were doing the cards to be in each other's emotional bodies, have them touching?
Oh, yes, very good. Aggie just mentioned to me that I failed to mention, if you get a deck of them cards, or anytime you're playing with anything, the best way to start, okay? Now, it'll work even with just spirit bodies touching, so you can pretty much be almost 30 foot apart. But the best way to do it is to get within 6 foot of each other, where your emotional bodies are actually... Do you see what I'm saying? Where your emotional body, your emotional body aura is actually intertwining So if you're looking at a plus sign, instead of just focusing on the plus sign, if you know it has some representation to who you're trying to send to, you send that along with it. See, if your emotional bodies are touching, you'll do a lot better. A lot better. And it's easy to find somebody to play with this stuff with you. I mean, Donald, I mean, you know, you've got to have a friend or something that'll zip you around. You know what I mean? It's fun, particularly when you make it start working. You know, just remember there's no, when you're doing something like this, I've had people say before, well, I'm better at it than my husband. I get more of it right. And I always go, well, that must mean he's a better sender. It's a two-way street. You see what I mean? If either one of you are getting up around 11, you're doing it together. You stop playing with this concept. There's no individuality. You know? Some people, you know, at the beginning may be better senders and other ones may be better receivers, but it takes both to make it work. You gotta both make it work. So all of a sudden...
I had a thought earlier.
Go ahead.
About the burden of knowledge, and I was remembering that the ability to like emotionally detach, or you know, not to emotionally react, and there go like a smaller emotional body, is helpful in this with that burden of knowledge.
Correct. That's why as a person starts getting towards adapt, all of a sudden they end up with just a 3 or 4 inch emotional body instead of 3 foot one. I'll give you a good example, Alan, on burden of knowledge. I'm not picking on you now, don't get offended. Remember 30 years ago, I got you started within 2 or 3 days, you were seeing auras. Within a month you weren't anymore. Burden of knowledge, you were seeing things you didn't want to see. You see things you don't want to see. You turn around and you're dealing with somebody and you see that they don't really like you, or that they want to take advantage of you. The burden of knowledge. Just because you see it doesn't make it any different. You know? But Alan picked it up in a couple of days and then... Okay, questions. It's tobacco time. Burn the knowledge. Intellectual consciousness. No impulse. You know, resist impulse. It's easy to do. Watch. Yeah, you're turning around. Yeah, you know how you'll be playing with your sister or something like that, and all of a sudden you feel like laughing. Resist it. Resist it. Develop the technique. If you can resist that, which is one of the happiest impulses, then you can learn to resist them all. And then you develop this little fine-tuning thing like a radio knob. Like, I know everybody in the room, they're all my friends, I can be impulsive. Oh, there's a stranger here, no more impulse. To dare, to know, to keep silent, and then make it turn out the way you want. Next week we get hardcore. Love you all. What's that?
Do we need to read the next chapter for next week?
Yes.
Number 6?
Yeah. And go for it. I mean, we're going to We're going to go for it, you know. So, anyway, chat with Aggie. I'm going out for cigarettes. Love you all. See you next week.
Cheers. Good night.